name is Krishana Sankar, and my handle on Instagram is at Beyond the Ivory Tower. And so I have a pinned tweet here to the live with my handle, and today I wanted to be chatting about having internships and developing skills for non-academic jobs post-graduation. So there were a few questions that came in, and I'll address them a little bit later. For now, though, I'll just give a brief background to myself. So I'm originally from Guyana, so a country in South America, and I immigrated to Canada for university. And I did my undergrad at the University of Toronto, all science-based, never taking any additional courses outside of science. And then continuing on to grad school, doing more science. And that's because I had lots of experience in undergrad, doing lots of lab work, and that started from my second year of undergrad, where I started working in labs. And then from there, I started in an insect physiology lab, and that was quite fun and interesting. And then from there, I went on to do a project. Hi there. Okay, you're studying biochemistry. Cool. So I went out to do a project for that very lab, and then after that, I wanted to get into stem cell work, and from there, I went into a mouse stem cell lab, and I was looking at the formation of blood vessels using mouse stem cells, and that was very interesting. But I wanted to work with human cells and human stem cells. So from there, I moved into a human stem cell lab, so a regeneration lab. And that lab was quite massive, pretty amazing. We did really cool stuff in that lab. There was a section that looked at trying to grow blood cells. There's a section that was looking at trying to grow pancreatic cells. There was a section looking at growing heart cells, so all these different types of cells in the dish, and it was really interesting. So my particular project was looking at how to grow human blood vessel cells, so it was pretty cool. And then so from there, I fell in love with research, having done it from second year up until fourth year, pretty much every year, every single summer and year after then. And I fell in love with it, and I said, you know what, I gotta continue. I really want to do this. So I applied to grad school, and my current lab does diabetes-related research on a basic level. So we look at using engineering and molecular biology techniques to improve a type of treatment for diabetes called islet transplantation. And my particular research, I combine the two, looking at ways to remove, islets from your pancreas, so the tissue that's responsible for regulating your blood sugar levels from the pancreas, and try to keep them alive longer for safer transplantation. So that's essentially my academic background. So what I really wanted to talk about today was more about what can we do with our degrees when we leave, and also trying to overcome all of that anxiety that we start to feel probably midway through when we haven't fully thought out what we wanted to do after we finished grad school. So, for example, midway through, I started getting really anxious, and it led to a lot of difficult feelings and emotions. So, for example, I started getting really sad, also depressed, trying to figure out what I would do when I was finished with my degree. And that's because I realized I did not want to stay in academia, and that at least running a lab per se was not necessarily for me. I would still like to be in academia, possibly lecturing and teaching, but not necessarily having and manning my own lab, because I saw the lifestyle. It is extremely hectic and extremely exhausting, and it's also not guaranteed. And I personally did not have the best experience within my journey, so I thought the best thing for me would to be look at jobs outside of academia and determine what I can actually use my degree to do. What skills have I actually honed and gotten from my journey and time in academia and used towards jobs that are outside of academia. So what I want to say is I was fortunate enough to apply and get a scholarship that was a 2-year scholarship. So it was a pretty prestigious scholarship that was for people who were combining engineering and biology, which is what I was doing in my project. And I managed to get the scholarship, and as some of you may or may not know, at least within the sciences in Canada, we are given a stipend, so we are paid for our research. And usually that money either comes from our professor's grant or it comes from a scholarship that you obtain. So of course, if you obtain a scholarship, that's way better than your professor having to pay you. And so I was fortunate enough to get that midway through my degree, my PhD. And what was great about this scholarship is that it required the recipient to do an internship, and the internship had to be outside an academic setting, which was amazing for me because at that time, that was the time I was feeling lost and concerned and worried and anxious and all these feelings about what I would be doing after I was finished. And during that time is really when my career exploration started, and that was when I had to start looking for internships because it was required from the scholarship that I got. So I started looking into internships online, and so a few tips I would give about that would be to look at job websites that you already know of. So for example, in Canada, we have Indeed.ca. There's also Workopolis.ca, I believe, but it's Workopolis. And then there's Monster.ca. So those are three job websites that you can look up. And when you go to those websites, you can add your keyword searches in there, and you can also save them. So what's great about it is when you save them, you can put in your email address, and then you get alerts for whenever specific jobs are being posted on these websites. So that's excellent because it saves you from having to manually go and look these up every single day. So instead of having to do that, the alerts just come to your inbox, and you can be alerted of whenever your job of interest comes up. So anyway, I started my search like that. And what I noticed is most of the internships were really long, and being a scientist at the bench, if you may or may not know, it's very difficult to actually leave the bench in order to do anything else, because basically our research is dependent on us being at the bench, especially as biologists. We are not able really to do any biology outside of the lab, so you have to be in the lab in order to get progress on your work. It's not like being a scientist who works on the computer all the time, so like a computer scientist, or a scientist that's in a dry lab and majority of your work is on a computer. So that's the main difference, and that's the main challenge for someone who is doing biology in a lab. So I would say I was fortunate because my scholarship required the internship. For other people, that might be more difficult for them to obtain a full-time job or internship outside of the lab, especially if they need to be in the lab. So I can address that a little bit later, but I'll just tell you a little bit more about my story. So having started my search online, I was seeing a lot of internships that required very long periods of time. And my supervisor at the time was saying that he preferred if I did something very short, so let's say 4 months or 3 months and 2 months even more, and I was finding nothing like that. But because of networking, I was able to meet someone who I had done a workshop with prior, and through chatting with them, they worked at a pharmaceutical company. I let them know that I was looking for an internship. And through that conversation, what happened was I sent, that workshop actually happened to be a resume workshop. So I gave them my resume, they passed it along. The hiring manager at the company really liked my resume, called me in for an interview. And during that time, the interview went really well. They were very impressed with my resume. And then I was fortunate enough to get the internship. So the internship was a year long. It was in the medical affairs department of the company. And it was amazing because it was my first time outside of the academic setting and working in an industrial setting. So that whole experience was great because not only was I able to now work in a very different setting that looked at pharmaceuticals, but I got to explore and talk to people within different departments. So medical affairs department, there's the marketing department, there's regulatory, and I started to learn more about the business side and the business aspects of things, and that was very interesting for me. And then I met with a lot of people and asked them a lot of questions, so I did lots of informational interviews. So those are the types of interviews that you do when you're interested to find out about jobs. And so I managed to do a lot of those during my time there at the company. I also, of course, worked a lot with a lot of more established and senior people, helping them out on projects. I even got to run 2 of my own projects. And I managed to get quite a few awards being there. So all of those things, of course, were really great and great motivators for me. It was exposing me to a different environment. It was also showing me things that I can do with my degree when I'm finished. So I got a newfound confidence and motivation, and that was really crucial to me during that period of time during my PhD journey. Just because, like I mentioned, I was going through a difficult time of concern and worry about what I would be doing when I was finished. So anyway, that came and went, and that was a year long, and that was an exceptional experience. So not only was I able to get more and new references, but I was able to amass this amazing experience that I didn't have prior. And so after that, I managed to I started exploring other avenues. So I started exploring other avenues within the non-academic job realm. And I started looking into consulting. And so consulting, because lots of people with PhD degrees, if you know or don't know, have been going towards consulting. And that is because there are several skills that we have and acquire and hone during our time of a PhD that consultants use and have, and they're also looking for within consulting firms. So for example, our soft skills when it comes to things like critical thinking skills, very important. Researching skills, very important. Knowing how, where, when to research and how to learn quickly and do things on the job quickly, very important. Team player, very important. Collaboration, very important skills, right? So all of these types of skills are skills that we have during our time doing a PhD, and those are also the skills that they need in consultants. And so that's one main reason why a lot of PhDs tend to go into consulting, especially lately, knowing the job market situation within the academic realm, knowing that we have more and more PhDs who are finishing and not having space within academia for them to get jobs. So with that being said, I started exploring. There were a few places, a few groups on my campus. Some were nonprofits, some were student organizations. There were also some in the community. So having had no prior experience, I started with the ones on my campus and went through a pretty interesting interview experience. So interviewing for consulting jobs is quite different from interviewing for other jobs that I've had experience interviewing for. So for example, interviewing for the consulting job is very different from the interview I had for the pharma job. And so there's a specific style and format and structure to that. And if you're interested in that, you can look into that and learn more about it. But anyway, I started there. I got a position in one of the organizations. And from there, I worked on a project as a consultant under a lead. And then going forward, after finishing that one project, which was pretty amazing, we were working for a nonprofit organization, and we were trying to increase their sales by, I believe, like or 20%. I can't remember now. I know two hugely different numbers. But we're trying to, basically our problem was to be able to increase their sales by X number over 5 years. And so it was really fun to be able to work in a group. And so I had to work along with others. We split responsibility. And also to do it with other really highly motivated and very bright people. It was such a fun thing to do. So after that experience, I wanted to do a little bit more of it, but I wanted to do it. I actually got an opportunity to do it in a leadership role. So they were so impressed by our team's work during my first project that they invited most of us back, and for me in particular, they invited me back to lead a next group of consultants. So I managed to do that the second time around. I was leading a second group of consultants. So it was myself, some business students, some other science students, and some biotechnology students. And it was a really amazing opportunity and experience being able to lead others, especially not feeling quite an expert in the area yet, but having had at least one experience under my belt. So those experiences all together, that along with doing a few case competitions, were really, really good in establishing what I wanted to, at least giving me an idea of what I could do when I finished with my degree. So those are two huge examples of what you can do based on the skills that you start to amass during doing a PhD. So for me, it was the experience of either working in pharma, or the other one is the experience of working in consulting. So whether it be management consulting or healthcare consulting. So those are my two experiences. There were two questions that came up about this, and so I'll address them. So one question was, would these opportunities be paid or unpaid? So for me, my first experience was a paid opportunity when doing the internship in the pharma company. So most internships these days are supposed to legally be paid. And so the second one that I did was not an internship, and so that's why it wasn't paid. But legally speaking, they're all supposed to be paid. My first experience, that internship in the pharma company, was paid, and it was actually pretty decently paying position. The second set of experiences I had were not paid. Those were on volunteer basis. However, there are other opportunities that I found within my network where people were looking for students or senior graduates who had amassed these experiences, and they needed someone to help them out with analyst roles and basically doing the research for their consulting cases and clients. So with those ones, though, they pay. So if you're fortunate enough to have had some experience and gain some experience perhaps doing a volunteer type position, then you can start to look for the paid positions. Especially, I would say, with consulting, is to get your feet wet first. It's, in my mind, a little bit of a different experience because you think differently. So for example, in a PhD, you start broad and you go narrow, especially, for example, when you're giving a presentation. You start with everything and then you go down to the details, versus in consulting, we call it a reverse pyramid, where you start exactly with the answer and then you go broad at the end to give the reasoning behind the answer. So that was one thing to get used to. And another thing is the interview process, where it's the cases, and so those require a lot of practice for some people, especially if it's brand new to you. You may not think that way. So I would really recommend people taking time to look into it and learn about it, and also find these resources online for case preparations, and those would be for interviews. So my second experience in the beginning for the management consulting things were not paid, but like I said, said, after getting those types of experiences, eventually you may be able to, within the community, find people who are looking for students one-off to do these roles, and then you get paid for them. So do analyst research roles and get paid for it. So now, having said all of that, so I was answering that one question, whether it's paid or unpaid. So the second question is, what internship opportunities are available in Toronto for undergrads going into grad school? So that's also another excellent question. So as far as I know, in terms of internship opportunities, I've recognized that there are more and more internship opportunities popping up for people in undergrad, at least the ones I hadn't even known about when I was in undergrad. Perhaps that was because I was more interested in doing lab work versus working outside of academia. So there are paid internships for undergrads going from undergrad to grad school, or, in the middle there. Once again, I would suggest looking at those websites. So for example, Indeed.ca or Workopolis. And also, when looking at those websites, look for the internships that are specifically for undergrads, or just look for internships. I've seen quite a few being called out, either from pharma and as well from consulting firms that are looking for people in undergrad or coming from undergrad. Also, there are other opportunities not only in pharma and consulting, but in other industries as well. And it depends on the role you're looking for. So most of these positions I've noticed, they have been for people doing, they're in, for example, finance or business roles, administration. If you're looking particularly for science will be a science type role, internship role. You would have to look more in a biotech, pharma related company, and with those they'll be very competitive because you will most likely be competing against graduate students. But definitely apply. Always still do apply, because you never know. I say that too because it's most times difficult for a biology graduate student or any person doing wet lab work to leave the lab. So it's going to be harder for them to apply for those types of positions, so you might be in a better position to actually apply and get in to one of those types of internship positions. And so yes, so I would definitely recommend checking out different industries. Basically, going to those websites and signing up for the alerts on the types of roles that you're interested in is very important, because it comes to your email or your inbox, and then you're aware of what's out there for you to actually apply to. Hi, Connie. So that was the second question I had. So what I would suggest is, for those of us who it's more difficult for us to actually leave the bench, what I've noticed is a lot of people have managed to find roles that are either part-time, or they've managed to take time off of school and actually go and work. And so when I say this, of course, they've managed all this very strategically, because it's not easy to manage. So if you know that's what you want to do after you leave grad school, because I would say this is more for people who want to get non-academic positions post-grad school, I would say really investigate it, look into it, see, and start the exploration process, because at the end of it, you have to think about what you want, what's best for you, and start exploring. So if you don't have that experience prior to leaving, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to start off where you think you want to go when you leave academia without having any prior experience. Because let's face it, the job market is saturated, and because PhDs are also becoming saturated, it's become super, super competitive in order for people to get the positions they want when they leave. So I would suggest looking for opportunities where you can do work part-time. and start, you can start locally before you go more globally. So when I say that, I mean you can start within your university campus, your university network, and start reaching out and seeing, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, you can determine whether or not your school has different entrepreneurship centers, and go there first and start looking and exploring and asking questions. Do you have internships? Do you offer internships? Do you offer part-time work? If not, can we make a position for me where I work for you part-time, and sell yourself to tell people, well, I have XYZ skills. What is it that you're looking for? How can I help you? And then sell yourself to them according to what they want and need. Of course, be mindful that you need to be truthful about what it is that you can and cannot do, but also remember that you can learn on the job. So I think that's very important to know. So I would start doing that. I would explore, I would ask around, I would start looking for things around my university campus, and then I would also broaden my search to things outside of the university beyond that, and start looking at the different companies I spoke about. So whether it be biotech, pharma, or consulting, and you start to go online and look at those alerts that you're getting to your email, and start to look into those opportunities. So that's what I would say for people thinking of doing it part-time or trying to get the experience while they're still in there. Some people I've known, and I myself had to do this, is, well, at least in my situation, I managed to take an academic leave of absence, and so that worked out better because I was out of school for a year, and it didn't really make sense for me to be paying fees if I'm not in school and I'm working and I wasn't going to the lab. So you can take a leave of absence, but you're doing this strategically, knowing that you're taking a leave because you're going to go work. But that, of course, like I said, depends on you, how you want to do it. Not every professor is going to be on board with you wanting to leave to work, so you will have to know how to deal with that situation. But I will say I do know quite a few people who've managed to do that. Whatever it is that they've managed to discuss with their supervisor or professor, and tell them that they won't be there for X number of time, or they'll be taking a leave and managing to come in on the weekends or whenever it is. But at the same time, they have acquired, or they've gotten a position and they're actually working somewhere else in order to get non-academic experience, because that's what they're hoping to do when they finish. So those are some tips I would give to people who are thinking of leaving and doing something a little bit different. I would say it is very necessary to get some experience, and we can't all get it, but if you can, it will put you ahead of others who you will most likely be competing against for positions, because that's just the reality of it. So anyway, it's been about 30 minutes now, and I think I've covered quite a gamut of things. I've done pretty much like a general overview of everything. If there are any specific questions that you may have, please feel free to send them to me directly at my Instagram. So I have my handle pinned here. It's at Beyond the Ivory Tower. And yeah, feel free to reach out and ask any questions you have regarding my experiences of having non-academic experience. And also, if you want any tips about how to go about doing it, finding opportunities, or if you're looking for resources, I would be more than happy to share with you. Like I mentioned again, those 3 websites, Indeed.ca, Workopolis, Monster.ca. So I know these are probably more Canadian specific, but I'm pretty sure they're American counterpart websites to the ones that I've just listed. And then also, if you'd like me to talk more specifically about one or the other roles that I chatted about briefly here today, I would be more than happy to do that. So, if you send me a message on my account, I could probably do another live and then have that saved, so you would have more information on specifically my role and what exactly I did within the pharma space, or my role within the consulting space on what I did. So yeah, I think that is about it. I don't know if anyone here has any more questions, but I answered a couple questions that were sent in, and if no one has any questions, I think I'm going to end this live. But it was fun to finally be able to get online and have my sound work, because I was having a bit of trouble with that earlier. But otherwise, It was fun being here, and I hope you learned something. I hope it was helpful and or useful for you. And like I mentioned again, you can reach me at Beyond the Ivory Tower. So that's it for me for tonight, and I'll see you.